Welcome to Toxic Beauty, a look at the HBO Max docuseries, Not So Pretty. My name is Roxanne Wilson, and for the next few episodes, I'm going to take you through a look at this pretty telling docuseries that goes into the trillion-dollar cosmetics, beauty, and personal care industry and raises awareness about the dangers of everyday makeup, hair, skin, and nail products. My hope is that you'll sit with myself and my friends and have an earnest conversation. And my hope is that through that, you are going to find what works for you, the actions that you might want to take to make sure that your beauty is not so toxic. Let's dive in. I think by now it should come as no surprise to anyone that when it comes down to it, the beauty industry, or more specifically, the skincare industry, is a $140 billion industry. Just think about that, $140 billion. What I think was a little bit alarming and surprising is that inside of that industry, that money churn, that, to borrow the phrase of one of the amazing women you're going to hear from in a moment, the big beauty, is that there are 10,000 industrial chemicals sitting right now inside of our skincare. 10,000, 10K. I want it 10 with 3 zeros after the 10. Let's just kind of let that sink in for a second as we lean into the episode that is called Skin. Now, I, of course, would not sit here and talk to you about this alone because I have some amazing people who know more about the industry than I do. And so I'm really excited to introduce to you two phenomenal women. Their names are Kirsty Maginness and Elizabeth Ann Kilpatrick. I'm going to hand it over to them for a moment and let them give you a little, who are they? Just a little quickie, but you're going to learn more about them as we dive into all things skin, the $140 billion industry. And then you ask yourself why they're not doing the right thing. Well, maybe because there's money on the line. Kirsty Maginness, tell us a little bit about yourself. Thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Maginness. I am a 52-year-old mom of 2 girls. I live in Seattle, Washington. I was not born in America, as you can tell by my accent, but I've lived here 20 years. And during that 20 years, I was a registered nurse, and I've worked in all sorts of different areas within healthcare, emergency room medicine, adult ICU, peds and infant ICU. I have a big passion for helping people. And when I transitioned away from working as a clinical nurse, I brought that passion for helping people and educating people to talking about skincare.
I love that. It's good to have you. And thank you for that. I know a lot of people can relate with so many different things you just said. So thank you for that. Elizabeth, talk to us.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Ann Kilpatrick, and I was born in this country in the Deep South. I live in a little town called Dadeville, Alabama. I am a mother of 3 plus 1, so I have a stepson in addition to my 3 children. And I have a master's degree in technical writing and have worked in the academic realm since 2003 at the university level. Just recently, I'll start a new job tomorrow in the e-commerce tech space, doing customer education. So I have a little bit of a different background than Kirsty, but I am also a very detailed oriented person. And from my background in academia, am trained to read peer-reviewed articles and really value where information comes from. And I've brought that into my passion for skincare and beauty and helping people in that way. The other thing that's significant about me is that I have been alcohol-free for over 2 years. And that's really how I transitioned in a lot of ways into the beauty space, and particularly into being concerned about some of the things we're going to talk about, which is what we put in our body and what we put on our body and the effect that that has on our health and our life overall.
Thank you. I think it's interesting about all that you said, and Kirsty, about what you said as well too, is that when we talk about skin and the things we put in and on our bodies, it affects everyone. This is a moment where it's like, it is everyone's skin is affected by this, if you know what I mean. And so, I understand why it's a $140 billion industry. What I don't understand, and which what frankly annoys and upsets me is that for an industry that's that big, we don't care. There seems to be, they don't care. And in some ways, we maybe don't care. We don't know we should care. It's that blind following. Oh, we trust you because you are the big business, and maybe we shouldn't. So let's like break it down chapter by chapter. And I do want to mention too, I'm curious, how did you guys feel when you saw the babies are born pre-polluted?
The first thing I thought about, I mean, I look at my own children and it's scary. I mean, and it can feel overwhelming. And we'll talk about this, I'm sure, but it can be scary to the point that you don't know what to do, but there are things you can do. And we'll talk about those things.
But it's it's scary. And you know what's interesting
it's so
too?
Scary.
It is. And I've always had that conversation with people like, wow, kids are going through puberty a lot sooner than they used to. Like back in my day, that was something we did like in junior high. Now they're like, oh, I'm 8 and I have boobs and I'm going through puberty. That's odd to me. I've always said like, are there hormones in the milk? What's going on here? Interesting things. In addition to that, the fact that I don't know. So let me just say that I don't know, but it seems as though more people are struggling with fertility now than before. So maybe there's a silent struggle and that could be it. And I'm sure that is part of it. But the amount of people that are going through IVF and other things, the reproduction seems to be no longer can you wake up, you go out to the tree and all of a sudden you birth a baby. It's not as simple as that any longer. And so I'm excited to dive into you guys about why. Chapter 1 is actually called hormones. And they introduced a little interesting something called endocrine disrupting chemicals. Our nurse here, hello you, endocrine disrupting chemicals. And they define that and then talked about fat. I think that most people have never heard that phrase. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a registered nurse, and actually, the interesting thing is, I have a history of unexplained infertility myself, and I always leaned into the idea that it had to do with a lot of us are having babies later in life, and that could be part of why we're experiencing higher rates of infertility. But if you actually look at statistics from 50 years ago, women did have children into their 30s, even into their 40s. So there is something else that's going on with that. And for me, I was always someone that's very healthy. I'm athletic. When my husband and I started trying to have children in our early 30s, I couldn't get pregnant. We went through, we had great health insurance. We went to some top infertility doctors, did extensive testing, and there was no physiological or hormone reason why I couldn't get pregnant in terms of just looking at straight labs.
Did anyone say anything about endocrine? Like, was that the word endocrine disrupting chemicals? Was that even brought up at that time?
They didn't. When I was going through IVF, my first child was 15. Basically, it was like, avoid alcohol, in the month that we were doing embryo transfers, and stay away from retinoid products. That was it. When I went through IVF, 5 rounds of IVF later, trying to have my second child, Liberty, they still weren't talking about endocrine disrupting chemicals, but I was now doing, because I was 43 at the time, I was now doing embryo adoption, and I was going to a clinic that a friend of mine who had done embryo adoption through. And 2 years after I had my darling Liberty, that same friend went back to the same clinic, and she started telling me now that endocrine disrupting chemicals found in skincare was suddenly a very big topic. And there was a whole list of things that she couldn't use and shouldn't use, because in vitro doctors are actually reproductive endocrinologists, and they were saying to stay away from all sorts of personal care products, because that was, at that point 5 years ago, that became really a thing that was beginning to come out.
Wow. So this is newer. And maybe that's why we don't realize. And I love that. I mean, it's good that we are finding out and we're learning more. And I think as a community and a culture, we want to learn more about our bodies. We want to feel like we're putting the right things in our bodies. And I do think a lot of that research and knowledge starts with the reproductive state, where it's like, okay, I'm trying to have kids. What are the reasons possibly that it's not working out? Why is there a difficulty? And so, but that is interesting that changed from, hey, just don't drink alcohol, don't have retinoids, to stop putting all of these things on your body. When you heard that, how did that make you feel as someone who'd gone through the process for what, 10, is it that fair to say 10, 15 years?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It was, it was 11 years of rounds of trying to get pregnant, and IVF and all the different things. It's deeper than that, because there's more research that's come out now linking endocrine disrupting chemicals, not just to reproduction and fertility. That's where your mind goes initially, because when you think hormones, you're thinking estrogen, progesterone, testosterone.
I'm going to pause you though. How did it make you feel when your friend told you that this was a thing now? Like knowing that you'd gone through 11 years.
Well, there's so much guilt and self guilt when you deal with infertility anyway, that your body's let you down. When you then realize that it wasn't just random luck, that possibly I've always been a beauty addict. I love the skincare crack. I love the beauty crack. I pretty bag with all the stuff on it at Nordstrom's. It's one of my favorite things to do. And to realize that perhaps my vanity in that area was part and parcel of why I couldn't get pregnant, was just added on top of that. And then, my oldest is on the spectrum, and, there's now studies that come out linking autism spectrum and some chronic disease with endocrine disrupting, because we're polluting our babies in utero. And that just adds a whole other layer of guilt to everything. But you don't know what you don't know. So I try and put that in perspective.
Yeah. And thank you for saying that, because I think that there are a lot of people who are feeling that right now and who are empathizing with you. And I want you, anyone who's feeling guilty or saying, and I think women bring that, of course, because women are the incubators. You feel that more than the guy, right? But I want to release, and I think you are beyond that, but I want to release anyone listening of that guilt, because like you just said, Kirsty, you don't know what you don't know. And you were doing all the things. And how are you supposed to know that the product that is on the shelf, that the product that people have been talking about for years and have just lauded from everywhere, how are you supposed to know? You're not supposed to know. And so if you are feeling that right now and you're listening, release yourself of that, because there's no way you would know. When we know better, we do better. We know now, but we didn't know before. And that's not my phrase. That's Maya Angelou's phrase. I just don't want to I don't want to. That was not my genius. That was her genius. So, okay. I feel like most people have heard something about phthalates, about parabens. We hear those things. We may not really know why they're bad for us, but we hear about them. Would you guys agree with that?
I mean, it's on labels now. I mean, that's the big thing. No parabens, no phthalates, no sulfates, no, I don't even know.
BPA
no this,
free.
no that. BPA free. I mean, there's a lot of labeling that's happening. And I think people go, okay, well, certainly this means this is safe.
Yeah. We'll get to that in some chapter.
Yeah.
We are in the hormone chapter right now. So I got to ask you, when you heard about the alligators. Thank you, alligators. Never thought I'd thank an alligator, but I'm thanking the alligators. And of course, the mice who are abusing their babies and going in circles. I remember hearing like, hey, when you hear about those mice tests, well, they pumped the mice with things like a crazy amount. And so it's not realistic. You've heard that in the past about different studies, but I have to wonder if the skincare that we've been using all our lives, maybe it's not in concentrate in that moment, but it is something that adds up. I mean, what did you guys think when you heard about those studies?
Well, I think from a study point of view, yeah, you're right. They're pumping a single ingredient into a mice in a high concentration. But actually, if you look at what we do in our lives, it's not just a lifetime accumulation of exposure to chemicals. There are so many. We're not just exposed to one. It's literally I used to use an 8-step skincare regimen, and that was just skincare, not including makeup, not including, my hair products, not including my nail products, not including, all the other things that, I'm exposed to in my house, in my life, in my cleaning products. You add that up over a lifetime, and that is a toxic slurry that we're exposed to daily.
I know you want to say, you're like, she's like, I want to say more. Toxic slurry, I think, is a good like visual for us to just like sit in for a moment, because we are sitting in it and we're putting it on ourselves and we don't even realize. So chapter 2 does lead into infertility. That's what they kind of took it from hormones and just like putting that, like, there's a lot of hormones going into our bodies that are not natural, into infertility and toxic chemicals. And of course, sperm quality. And they brought the doctor who had this like epiphany because she checked her husband's sperm, or her soon-to-be husband's, and he didn't have many little fishies swimming in the pond.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's the bottom line. I give it to you real. That's basically what she realized. And then of course she freaked out, and then they went through all his stuff. And that's where they break down more that babies are being pre-polluted because of the industrial chemicals. I'm kind of curious why there's industrial chemicals in our skincare anyway. Like, why do we have things that are like in oil refineries going into our body?
Petrochemicals. Well, I think partly it's just because the companies have figured out how to take the waste products from petroleum refining and found uses for them. And who didn't grow up with a big, huge tub of Vaseline somewhere in their house? Seriously.
I did.
We, on our lips, for our dry skin on our hands, and all of those things. And the petrochemicals part, it just all blows my mind. Like they talk about the Cancer Alley in Louisiana, and I have been on that stretch of road.
Oh, wow.
It's between Baton Rouge and New Orleans. It's the I-10, and then I-12 actually goes across, and I-10 dips down, and then you catch it back. And I've gone past that area my entire life. My father lived in Texas, and I was in Alabama, so we had to drive that. And to really realize, to be like, oh my gosh, that's where so much of this happens, is nuts to me. And then also as a mother, the pre-polluted thing, I don't know that I've ever told you guys this. Like, I went through puberty very early. So I started my period at 10.
Wow.
And always had issues. I ended up with secondary infertility, not as severe as Kirsty's, but we struggled to get pregnant and stay pregnant. And so when I began to research this, I realized, holy cow, like, I'm a walking endocrine disruption. Absolutely. That was my first thought, was I'm a walking endocrine disruption. And my second thought was, and this is why we are all sick. As a culture, why we have so many things like, for me, ADHD, anxiety, hypothyroidism, secondary infertility. The list. And these are things we just accept as a normal part of modern life, and they are not. And then you visualize the oil refineries and the stuff and it just, all of it. It's a little mind blowing. I'm going to say that like 18 times.
No, that's okay. Say it.
But,
say it.
And to realize that in many ways, even as a child, I already was showing signs of that sort of endocrine disruption and the effects of that. I was born in 1976. My mother didn't know. Nobody knew.
Johnson & Johnson is mentioned in this episode, so I feel like we can go down that road a little bit. I do want, these episodes are really y'all meant to like stand alone. So if you watch one episode, you get your goodies in that episode. But it is mentioned in this episode at some point. And you mentioned 1976, and I just think, wow, in the 70s, they realized, oh, we shouldn't be using baby powder, but we have corn, let's use it anyway. I have a really hard problem being okay with companies who knew and didn't care.
Not just didn't care, but actively covered it up.
Yeah.
I think I always had as I said, the medical provider trust factor. I trust big pharma, trusted big pharma, big this, big that. That's just my mindset. And, I had looked at you're seeing emerging rates of autoimmune disease, kids being diagnosed with ADD, autism spectrum. And my medical model mind always said, well, it's because we're getting better at diagnosing stuff, that, healthcare is getting really down into the weeds. We're early identifying. Schools, I help identify kids. And my mind has really changed over the last decade, but I'd say that's the mindset I came from. And then when you watch, when I was watching this show, I had always had the idea that perhaps, I was aware of endocrine disrupting chemicals, not the pervasiveness of it, but my mindset was still of that trust mentality that companies just didn't know, or, they either didn't know or they were waiting on more data. So they're not going to really change stuff until there's more data that clearly indicates that it's more than just a couple of mice studies. But I think that was the thing that mind blowing about watching that was realizing actually big beauty does know. They have known for decades, and they cynically cover it up. All sorts of strategies. They know about phthalates and their role in endocrine disruption. And so they have strategies where they blatantly will say, Johnson & Johnson, other companies that purport to be green and clean, they'll say phthalate free, paraben free. But actually, what they've done is they've put it under the term fragrance or natural fragrance.
So that's a nice segue to chapter 3. If you want to go there, we'll go there, which is smells like phthalates. So the thing fragrance, and what's so interesting for me personally is the fragrance thing has come up a lot in my life. Like, I'm like, fragrance, what's that? Like as an ingredient, what is that? And prior to watching this, that had come up, and I'd gotten the advice from someone to stop using fragrance, products with fragrance in my house. I'm like, oh, okay. And not even for these reasons, but for some other reasons. But when I saw that, I was like, what? So the trade secret, right? You can't like give away your trade secret, what's in your secret sauce. So you can call anything fragrance. And anything can be in fragrance. That's my understanding from what we watched.
It's not actually what you're smelling. That's not what fragrance means.
Right.
Sometimes it does.
Sometimes it could
be,
but
not in the trade ingredient part.
No, and it's not regulated. No one regulates it. When you think about the fragrance industry alone, that's a $7 billion industry. But you see how it's not just the fragrance aisle and the perfume aisle. We're not even really talking about that. We're talking about fragrance and everything. And I got to tell y'all, I was getting a headache. Scott bought those little like air things you plug in. I don't remember which brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh, I'm like, this fragrance. And he's the type that puts things, he just puts it everywhere. And I'm like, so he's like 4 in there. We don't need 4 in the house. And so I'm like, why is that bothering me? Let me just go look at the ingredients. So I looked it up. This is before I watched this. I looked it up and I'm like, it has fragrance in there, right? So now we're having this big battle. Like, I'll unplug him and hide him, and then he'll find him and put him back in. Because, and I think this is, the reality of it is, if I'm like, hey, those are bad for you, I need, you know how you have the person, oh, that's bad for you. I need more substance behind the why it's bad for you. I think I need to just have him sit down and watch this episode.
Watch the show.
Frankly.
Oh, yeah.
Because now we're doing like literally a war where I'll turn it down to 1 if I know he's in the house because he has it at the highest. And then I'll like unplug him while he's not there. I've gotten one that's completely gone, but he's like, they're and I'm just, so I think this is interesting because fragrance has a lot of rhymes with hit inside of it. I want this to be a family friendly episode. So when you guys saw this and the fragrance thing, you guys knew about this already though, right? This wasn't new for the two of you, or
The fragrance thing was not new for me. Like that is the one thing I tell people off the bat. If you do nothing else, do not buy anything that has in the ingredient list fragrance or even natural fragrance. No different, because that is where those, I can't say it, phthalates.
Uh-huh.
It's like PHTH.
Phthalates. You don't pronounce the P.
It's a weird, anyway, phthalates. That is where the phthalates are. And it's not the fragrance itself. My understanding is the phthalates are the thing that help the fragrance last. So when you put some perfume on, or you use a good smelling lotion and you can smell it, 3 hours later, that's because it has phthalates in it, which are a petrochemical waste product, essentially byproduct. And who in the world, first of all, who figured out that a byproduct of petroleum refining made things smell good longer? I don't even know. Like, that's one of those things I was like, that's an odd thing, but somebody figured it out and we are all paying the consequences. I mean, on the episode, the guy was throwing stuff out and he literally said Dove soap.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Y'all think about Dove. I mean, it's clean and it's soft and it's soothing and for sensitive skin and it's body positive and all these things.
Yeah,
it's a Dove. Oh, and it's white or pink or soft green. And all of it is marketed to make you think safe.
Yes.
And it's not.
So what struck me was that they said that low dose levels still affect you. And they had the analogy with the drop of water in the Olympic pool. Y'all watch it, you know it. But it has tiny amounts of EDCs. I literally wrote down fragrance and like a note, like the no sign over it. So phthalates, the lates. I mean, it brings up all these thoughts to me. First of all, does this mean that I can't buy my perfume? Is my perfume bad? How do I know that? And then what I'm hearing you say is that anything, lotions with scents in it, we don't want those scents.
I think it's the things you do every day. And I think, yes, unfortunately, I mean, my favorite perfume is Gucci's Flora Bunda, and it's just gorgeous. So I don't use perfume every day anymore. I maybe use it like once a month or so, and I'll spray it onto my clothes rather than on my body. And, I'm not prepared to live a life where I'm not going to put anything on my skin or have any nice things. But I am going to be very judicious about how I apply them. And I think it's interesting that the push and pull you're having with your husband. And I think that comes down to, that misunderstanding that hormone disruptors are to do with female reproductive system. And hormones, just back it down a little bit, hormones are the chemical messengers that are part of your endocrine system. And your endocrine system tells pretty much every cell in your body how to operate. It's your sleep, with melatonin and serotonin, your mood, cortisol and serotonin. It's your thyroid, it's your digestive system and your metabolism. Literally, it's adrenaline, it's norepinephrine. All of those things are hormones. And, how hormone disruptors work, they work in two ways. They either can act like a master key where they go absorbed into your body and they go to those receptor sites and can turn it up. Like a lot of phthalates are estrogenic. So they make your body produce much higher quantities of estrogen. Or they can shut down the production like of thyroid. They can basically stop your body producing the quantities it's supposed to, like gumming up the works. So it's so pervasive and affects so much of how our body operates. And, when I think people understand that it's not just getting pregnant or, fertility, you're like, I don't want to have kids anyway. I was going to say something. It was going to be rude and had to do with chicks and
okay.
But as a guy, if that, being able to be a fully functioning man, then you probably want to minimize your exposure to estrogen.
Hey, what she just broke down there is if you're having that conversation with your guy, if he wants to avoid the blue pill, perhaps he should probably get rid of fragrance.
There you go.
There we go.
Rather than the blue
Here we go. EDCs equal ED.
Oh, look at that. The copywriter for the win. I love that. But what you're saying, Kirsty, I think is so important is that it affects everyone, and hormones aren't just like, it's making us work and making our body work. And if we put something in our body that disrupts it, which is why it's called hormone disruptor, our body's not working the way it's meant to work.
Right. And you've got a kid, gynecomastia which is the breast development, is like you're seeing increasing numbers of it in adolescent boys. Well, that's not normal.
So funny you say that, because my sister is a pediatric endocrinologist. And while she couldn't be with us today, one of the things she did tell me is that oftentimes when they do have whatever you just called it,
gynecomastia.
Okay. Yes. They ask certain questions like, are you using certain things in the house? Is your husband using any testosterone like cream or something like that? Because even having, and again, these are not her words, these are my words. And so I've totally like bastardized the whole thing. But even that on your hands can get then transported, and it can cause some early budding or some budding that shouldn't be happening we used to call them buds. Well, I was like, oh, you have a little bud, like the budding of I don't know. They were buds. You know, they're little chips. No, they're like, okay. Anyway, I laughed.
So we got it.
You don't want that. Yeah, you're like, we're well aware. We've been there. So fragrance is something we really need to think about. And I love that you said that. And we're going to talk about a little bit later about steps that we can take. But like you said, the number one thing is let's get fragrance out of the house. And then Kirsty, you said, it affects all of us and affects the way our body should work. That's huge. That's a huge takeaway. And it makes me feel less helpless. And the goal, I think, and maybe I think they tried to get to this. I'm trying not to get ahead of myself, but we'll get there. We'll get ahead of ourselves in a second. I think the whole point of this docuseries, and they're at the end when they do the do's and don'ts, is they're trying to make you feel less helpless, but I don't think they got there. I don't think
they gave you some apps. I think at the end, that was it.
And one of the apps actually they changed the name. It's kind of hard to find. So we'll talk about like hope in a moment. We're going to get there, but I just want you guys to know, if you're listening, you're like, my anxiety is going. We're going to give you more hope and the point of this is to give you more hope than perhaps the docuseries did.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about packaging, shall we? BPAs, leaching from the packaging, the products. This was like, I almost felt like, can we do another, like I wanted to say, Kiki and the producers, can we just do another episode on this? Because now you are making me feel like now I got to be worried about the hormones in it. Then I have to be worried about the phthalates and the fragrance. And now you're telling me I got to be worried about the packaging too? What the heck?
Plastic is the devil.
Oh, okay.
That's what I'm from the South. I'm just going to say it. No, this is something that has become very, very important to me. We are a household that, like, I've always been concerned about food waste. That's something we feel really strongly about, and waste in general. I am a conservationist. I do believe that we have a responsibility to be good stewards of our resources. So, there's an entire discussion to be had about plastic and the environment, but there is another huge reason to be concerned about plastic. And it's this: when we can have the cleanest product imaginable, no endocrine disruptors, nothing that's going to mess with any part of your system. And if you package it in plastic, You have negated almost all of that because most plastics that we use leach endocrine disruptors.
Okay, so
and
for those who don't understand what leaching is, quick definition.
Well, I mean, I don't have I'm not Merriam-Webster or anything.
No, I mean
but
like a third grade level.
It basically means that the plastic will start to deteriorate, for lack of a better way to put it. And those molecules migrate and get into whatever is there. So the way that we really started to be aware of this was water bottles, that you buy in the store. We all buy bottled water now, and baby bottles and all of this stuff. So the movement then became BPA free. So BPA is typically the endocrine disruptor that people associate with this. That's the one, the chemical. So companies knew that people were getting upset about it. So they started making BPA free plastic. And one thing that they talk about on this episode is that some of the replacement plastics are 1,000 times more toxic than the BPA plastic.
Well, BPA just means bisophenyl A. So if you BPA free means it's just not bisophenyl A. You can have bisophenyl B, C, D. I mean,
S.
I mean, and that's what they do is the studies that came out on BPA. And so manufacturers and the industry just basically shifted one molecule. And then it's now no longer BPA, it's BPZ.
Right. Well, and to be clear, these companies didn't do this out of the goodness of their hearts. There was, and this is really key. There was pressure in the market. And so in response to the pressure in the market, the companies changed one or two little molecules. It's no safer, but now they can say they don't have that. They don't have the BPA. And again, I think that the assumption that we have is that they are being responsible and they are being good stewards to their customers. And that is not an assumption we can make.
No, not with a $140 billion industry. They have no incentive to care about the consumer.
And
they care about us buying it, but that's it.
And there are many, many quote unquote clean products that are packaged in plastic. And we are at my house really trying to transition out. Because I'm somebody who cares about waste, it is really hard for me to throw things away. Mm-hmm. But I'm walking through my house lately and I'm like, oh my God, that's in plastic. That's in plastic. That's in plastic. So, the packaging issue is really huge.
Yeah. The whack-a-mole thing I thought was they described it as whack-a-mole. So it's now they're just, and honestly, when you have a $140 billion business, this is a helpless feeling. So forgive me for this, but you're always gonna feel like you're behind. Okay. So we stopped A, now you're using B or C or D or G. What the heck? But 93% of humans have BPA in our urine and blood. Think about that. Mm-hmm. Think about that. And I want another visual I love that you mentioned water bottles. Have you ever noticed if you have a water bottle? I have a water bottle from when I was on, true story, when I was on The Apprentice. I have a Trump water bottle that I just I have in all my mementos from the show. And what's interesting is every time I move, I see that water bottle and the plastic is getting crunchier and crunchier and crunchier. And it's I would never drink it anyway, but it's well, now that's interesting. What's happening to you, plastic? I'm not even doing anything. You're deteriorating. So plastic is an issue. And more importantly, we're being more aware of the fact that it's got to be pressure from the industry. We cannot expect government. I'm not going to get political, but we can't expect government to solve this because they could have solved it a long time ago and they have not. So we either sit there and wait and insanity, just sit there and wait. They'll do it, or we've got to do something different.
As a nurse, I've always had a deeper trust of the FDA. The FDA in medicine has a very strong role in making sure that pharmaceutical products, medical devices are both safe and efficacious. That means that they work. And there's a very, very high bar they have to meet for a product to be deemed releasable to the public. And, it's not 100% because more research will come out, drugs will get pulled over time. But they have a strong regulatory arm when it comes to that. I always presumed that the consumer side of things, the food and product side of things was similar. And actually, it is entirely toothless and has very few, even when they know something isn't safe, they have no real ability. They rely on the individual manufacturer to do a voluntary recall.
So with that, this is a good segue into chapter 5, which is environmental impacts, right? So when we talk about the environmental impacts, we're talking about plastic and, like you said, all of these things that you mentioned that are okay in the US to be putting in products, but actually aren't okay in Europe or other places. In the document, it said 9 million tons of plastic are in the ocean. That picture, whenever you see that visual, I'm like, there'll be 29 million by 2040, which is not that far away. Some of your kids they'll be graduating from high school. There'll be 29 million there. And of course, that's going into the water, the soil system. I think we're at a point now where those who didn't believe in the environmental impact of what we're doing have to at least recognize that maybe there's something to it. So hopefully I'm going to assume that we're all there where we think there's something to it. But when we talk about cosmetic companies and the chemical and plastic refineries and all of that goodness. And of course, what you just said, Kirsty, is right along with that. We've banned 10 and 13. The EU has banned 1,300. I can't talk about this without talking about, and I know we mentioned it earlier, but this is where they talk about Cancer Row. And this is where we talk about how it disproportionately hurts minorities.
Absolutely. 100%.
And the problem, well, there's a lot of problems with that, is that just the definition minority means that your voice is not as big, which means making change, we can all agree, takes a lot longer time if it ever is going to happen. And so I can't help but wonder if more attention was paid to the minority, Cancer Row. You call it Cancer Row. What more do you need to know? But if studies and attention was put there on an awareness, hopefully it would change what's going on. Because not only do minorities who are in these areas they're being polluted on a regular basis, but you also have to wonder, and minorities, I'm going to also say those of lower income don't necessarily have access to not only getting better products because the better products are more expensive typically, but also to the healthcare to help them when they do have these issues.
And companies are very, very well aware of that. We know that. And that has been proven over and over if you pay even a little bit of attention. But we have to realize that even what happens in Cancer Row, even if we feel like plastic in the ocean seems really far away and doesn't affect us, or that these people are being affected, it affects all of us because it infects the earth in general. And Kirsty can tell you, but I mean, there was a study that came out just recently that they are now finding microplastics in human blood. We are now beginning to walk around with tiny little plastics in our blood. And so there is an effect on all of us. And the reality is that companies understand that people who are in a lower socioeconomic bracket, that are in minority populations, that they are, in a sense, guinea pigs in a lot of ways, yes. Directly in some cases, and certainly indirectly. And that part just boils my blood in a way that I cannot explain.
Yeah, because they realize that people won't care. We can. So we got in trouble for testing prisoners. So let's just, so let's just move the testing elsewhere is essentially what they're doing. And yes, indirectly in a lot of ways, but hello, that's what they're doing. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kirsty. Go ahead.
Oh, no. Well, I mean, we saw this with big tobacco, that when studies came out linking tobacco use to cancer, those companies put warning labels on things in the States. They were forced to not allowed to advertise anymore. But what they did was they moved it all into developing countries where they target advertising, where they have all of the higher tobacco, higher menthol products targeted at developing countries. And the rates of early puberty in minority communities is much higher. And you look at the products that are targeted towards minority populations, and they tend to be a lower quality, higher in, in phthalates, in parabens, in all these things that you're beginning to see being pulled out of products that are more targeted towards Caucasians. And you see that impact on their health. And there's a study that came out last year out of Berkeley. It's called the Hermosa study. And they looked at skincare ingredients that Latina girls tend to use. They tested their urine, found high levels of phthalates, of BPA in them, and then they changed their products up to products that were free of endocrine disruptors. And within a week, those those measurable levels dropped. But it's very cynical in the way in which products are targeted. You see much higher rates of aggressive breast cancer with African-American women, and that tends to be, it could be related to hair products, but it's no doubt really related to the products that targeted at that community. And why it's not just a genetic thing is actually, if you look at cancer rates in Africa, very low rates of cancer in Africa, much not negligible, but much lower than you see in developed countries. And that has got to be the exposure of that population to EDCs, BPA. It's not like they aren't exposed to toxins and chemicals and agricultural products that we don't have here. But what they're not exposed to is the plethora of skincare and beauty products that we slather on our bodies here.
Wow. I need to sit with that for a second. That's huge. You gave a little hope in there. There was a little. When you mentioned the Latina girls and when they switched and they used non-endocrine, and so y'all, sometimes we say EDC, and that's what we mean, endocrine disruptors. They saw the numbers go down. And inside of the documentary, the doctor's husband, after 7 years of detoxing, they were able to get pregnant. There's hope in that.
There is hope.
There are things we can do. There are things that we can do that can help us take control of what we're exposed to. And there's simple steps.
And the body is our bodies are amazing things, right? And so the hope I also see in that is that even though there's been years of ingesting, Lord knows what we've ingested, quite frankly, and all the things, our body is willing to receive and work with the thing. Like if you give it a break, right? If you detox it, or low tox, I guess is more realistic, it can make some changes. So let's talk about the do's and don'ts. And just very quickly, the do's and don'ts that were said inside of the documentary were basically download. They have some apps. I have downloaded the apps and played around with them. I think, of course, in my research, I found that none of them were as, I don't need to go to, frankly, I don't want to go to 3 apps to see what my products have in it. So I would love for there to be a comprehensive one. And I did send some of my things off, send it, we'll look at it. Not the actual product, but the picture. But that is a little clunky. I'm just going to go ahead and tell whomever, Claria and all EWG, it's a little clunky. Y'all need to get together, make it really easy for me. Give me one. Because honestly, I believe that if it's not easy for people, they're not going to do it. Or not as much as they want to. The other thing they said, of course, is to eliminate fragrance. Don't use plastic packaging. They said, 3, 6, and 7 is bad. And then 2, 4, 5 helps you stay alive. Or maybe just go for glass, y'all.
Better.
If your product comes in
glass.
glass, you're going to be better, much better off.
Better off.
Yeah, glass, stainless steel is another alternative that is typically considered a better option.
Yeah.
There, and I'm starting to see some of that.
You didn't know that they're doing that because stainless steel, my jewelry background is hypoallergenic. So that I did not know, and it's very, very strong. I didn't know they're using that in skincare. I'm excited.
They are starting to do that as well. I'm seeing some of that. So definitely, like, if you do nothing else after listening to this or watching these things, and I cannot say this strongly enough, if you do nothing else, get fragrance off of your skin and out of your home.
Mm-hmm.
If I have one overriding thing that after all of my research, now I think you should be doing a bunch of other things too, but the fragrance thing is so pervasive. And, you know, I mean, not to come out of skincare, but candles, body care, you know, the cleaning products we use, just as much as is humanly possible, get rid of fragrance. And I'm not talking essential oils necessarily. I'm talking the fragrance that is not disclosed.
I think with essential oils, though, we should be more specific about where we're buying our essential oils. When we see essential oils, and I'm going to guess that you don't have to like have certain clarifications to say your essential oil, right?
I am not familiar enough with the industry.
I mean, if it's the FTC, we're going to go with a no. I'm just deciding that.
Right.
I've decided it.
Right. But that is the one, that is my number one recommendation.
Yeah.
And it's something we can do, and it makes a big difference.
Yeah. And I'm going to go back to essential oils for a moment because when you see like diffusers and things and you just grab some fragrances and you go to those, you know, those stores that are like, I got it for less stores, right? You just grab it. Y'all, you do not know what's in that product. You do not know. And you know what? They don't know either. And so I think we need to be really careful. If you're going to buy essential oils, if you're going to diffuse, make sure you're getting it, do your research. And I'll go one further. Those stores, I'm not trying to bag those stores, but I'm being real. When people tell me they go and buy their skincare from those stores, because it's less expensive. You have no idea how long it's been on the shelf. You have no idea these off-brand funny name things that are not actually named. You could not, if they don't have a website that you can research, maybe you shouldn't be putting it on your body. Also, Amazon, not to call out Amazon, but do we know when we buy certain things from Amazon? Do we know?
We do not. We do not. One thing that and this gets into, and I tell this to people, yes, we want to replace plastic with glass and stainless steel. We want to eliminate fragrance. There are a lot of other things, but we vote with our dollars. We can lobby for more regulation, but ultimately in our current environment, the way we make big change is by choosing to purchase from companies that are transparent in their ingredients, that are third-party certified. And a lot of times there are third-party certification organizations like the Environmental Working Group who look at these things and are not funded by company money. And so the way that we make change in the market is every time we choose to buy from a company that is transparent, that's packaging in glass or stainless steel, that is doing all those things, we are not putting our dollars to the companies and the products that are harmful. And if enough of us do that, we begin to move the market. Because let me tell you, dollars talk.
Yeah. Money
in our economy, that's it. Money talks.
So, but here's the thing that I want people to know, because, you know, y'all mentioned Dove earlier in the call out. I want you to be open when you are looking and saying, yes, I'm going to do this. So yeah, we're going to get rid of fragrance. We can do that. And when you do that and you put that all in a container and then in a bowl or a box, I actually want you to take a picture. Would y'all take a picture and like tag? I'd love to see it. But here's the thing. You're going to see there's a lot of things and you're going to say, oh crap, what can I buy? What can I get then? And is it going to be super expensive and all these things? I want you to, well, think about your health. First of all, is it worth it to your health and the health of your family? But the other thing I want you to think about is this. You may not find that replacement at your big store. You may need to do some research. You may need to look online. There are amazing companies that, like you said, that are certified and have third-party testers looking at it. And I think we really need to lean into that and don't expect for a commercial on TV to be the savior that's going to be that new product. I don't want you to assume that the commercial on TV, I think about it, like, we know, and I get a little frustrated. I do, because Scott and I were talking about McDonald's the other day, and we know McDonald's is not good for us. Do we all know that, right? That's like given. And that Super Size Me documentary came out, 10, 15 years ago now? What has changed for McDonald's since then? I'm curious. Like, did they slap on a little marketing campaign and they kept going? Like, I bet we could still take those fries and put them in a container and they would not mold.
Want me to blow your mind a little more?
I think they just started offering more salads. I think that's what they did.
There you go. Yeah, blow our minds.
The paper that your cheeseburger is wrapped in, and the box that your cheeseburger comes in, and the box that your fries come in, and the cup that your drink is in has EDCs, has endocrine disruptors. People who eat fast food have significantly higher levels of those harmful chemicals that eat fast food often, because the ink that's on the freaking paper has endocrine disruptors.
And of course, it's hot and probably melts, and then you're eating
it.
Immediately.
I mean, and so, not to scare you, but there you go.
But it is good to know. And the point of that really is, we cannot depend on, we have to take the initiative. Like, if you're sitting here feeling like, oh my gosh, what can I do? Remember, you have control. You can do something about it. And eliminating even some of your fragrance is going to be better. One of the things I love about you, both of you, Kirsty and Elizabeth Ann, is that you all have started this journey. You're ahead of us on the journey. So thank you for being ahead of us, because I think we need to find people who are ahead. There are, when you see people who are like, totally like, I have removed there's nothing. And, that's a little much.
I mean, as much as I'd like to go live on a commune in Montana and like commune with nature and whatever, I really like makeup and I want my hair to look good. And I love skincare, and I just, that's not realistic for the life that I lead. I bet Kirsty would say the same thing.
But there are things you can do. I mean, you can now, hair products, instead of buying them in liquid form, you can buy very good shampoo bars and conditioning bars. Within skincare, it's looking for products that are generally going to be oil-based, because if it comes as the cream, it means that they've added thickeners to them and preservatives to them. Oil is a natural, oil-based serums on natural antibacteriostatics, and you want them to be packaged in glass containers. You want a cleansing bar rather than a plastic wash or scrub, something comes in a plastic container. If you can make those moves, and just check that ingredients list, that it doesn't have fragrance or natural fragrance on that ingredients list.
You want to also go for products that have disclosed all their ingredients. So it is a huge red flag with personal care if there's this kind of like inactive ingredients or other ingredients. I mean, if they don't disclose everything, assume that there's a reason for that. So choose companies that have full ingredient lists and say full ingredient list. That is super important. And I mean, as I was starting to say, and Kirsty hit on it, if you used to look at my counter in the bathroom, you would see a bunch of plastic containers, and I had a ton of them. I mean, I was using, I think, 7 products just on my face, and they were all packaged in plastic. I've gotten that down to, I use 2 products in the morning and 2 products at night. And I'm choosing now products that multitask. So my stuff's packaged in glass. It is oil-based, but it also serves multiple purposes. I don't use a separate eye cream anymore. My oil-based serum is my eye cream. It also conditions my lashes and brows. My lashes look better than they've looked ever, and I'm 46 years old. So you want to not just think in terms of it, but think in terms of what can you invest in that replaces more than one product. The fewer products you use, really, the less waste there is, the less potential for exposure, etc. The better for the planet. It all works together. And I think that's really the thing. The other thing that I really have had to say to a lot of people is do the best that you can to make your home a safe haven. Any small change you make makes a difference in how your body reacts. It really does. Every small change. There is no way to avoid endocrine disrupting chemicals. There is not. The environment we live in is full of them. You can control what is in your house. You can control what you put on your skin. You can control what you eat and put in your body. That is where your power is. And every study that they do shows that making those changes does make a difference. And that's where the hope is.
That's where the hope is. That is where the hope is. And I want to thank you both because this has been so helpful. And I know that you guys are listening going, okay, I want like more. And one of the things I love about Kirsty and Elizabeth Ann, not only that I just adore them and they're friends, but also they inspire me to figure out this low tox living, to figure out the endocrine disruptors in my life and see what I can eliminate or reduce. And they make it easy. So if you would love, you'll hear about it in a moment, but I just want you guys to know, and I want to thank both of you for taking the time to really develop something that's going to help us if we're on our journey, just step by step on how we can do it so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. That we do have hope, and we do know that we're not only making things better for ourselves, but for our loved ones and for the environment in general. Thank you both for being here and for all that you do. And we'll give you some information on finding them and all that you guys are working on. But tell us where you are on Instagram.
I'm at Kirsty Maginness.
And I'm at Elizabeth Ann Kilpatrick.
Love it. Awesome.
Easy peasy.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate you. And this discussion is one that I think will really continue in different places so that the word can get out. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for joining us for the RoxTalks Limited series, Toxic Beauty, a look at the HBO Max docuseries, Not So Pretty. Now you're probably wanting to know more, probably wondering now what to do. And that's why we've put together a special website for you. It's called Toxic Beauty Podcast. There you're going to find some information that will help you get into next steps, including a free guide to your low tox life, a beginner's guide to get you into just knowing more about what products you might want to look at, you might want to change, and how you want to live your life. In addition, we have some Instagram links for you that's going to give you a great guide to perhaps some people you might want to listen to and follow and just to get more information. And we'll also on the website feature information about each one of our guests from all of the episodes. Now, I by no means have any desire to tell you how to live your life. I'm still just trying to figure out how to live mine. But I know that at the Toxic Beauty Podcast page, you're going to find information that runs the gamut that will help you to make those decisions for you and your family. I'd love for you to share this series with others, and please don't hesitate to tag us at RoxTalks if you would like to continue the discussion on Instagram. And don't forget to pick up that free guide. Thanks so much. Take care, and we'll see you